to The Break Room, the podcast where the best work convos happen. We're joined today by your hosts, including workplace psychologist Maria.
Hi.
And your favorite Gen Z colleagues, Isle, that's myself, hi, and Jaya.
Hello.
Today, we're talking about a spooky workplace trend happening nowadays, and it's called office ghosting. Today, we're unpacking why people go silent at work, what it says about company culture, and whether disappearing is sometimes self care in disguise. But before we get into it, I think you guys have heard or seen, depending on where you're watching this. I want to introduce new faces, new voices on the episode today. So we're joined by Maria and Jaya. And maybe Maria, you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we start filming.
So, hi everyone. My name is Maria, and I am a consultant psychologist at iGROW. A fun fact about me: I am from Thailand. However, I have been living in Singapore for more than 20 years already, and so I hope that's a fun fact. What about you?
All right. Hi everyone. My name is Jaya. I'm the sales and client relations specialist here at iGrow. And fun fact, I guess, would be it's my very first time being part of a podcast, so it's an exciting experience for me. And I've had my coffee intake today, so right now I'm actually palpitating, but I'm excited right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you're keeping the coffee culture alive, Jay, because that's what we do at the break room. It's like everybody just kind of unwinds, stay at the break room, and I hope that that's the vibe that we bring in our podcast. So, yeah, thanks to you both for joining us today, and I'm excited to get into the episode because it is quite a controversial topic of office ghosting. And before we get into it, let's define what office ghosting means. So, in the context of the workplace, ghosting refers to a situation where an employee, a candidate, or even a manager abruptly cuts off all communication with a company or a coworker without explanation. So, I think everybody has kind of bumped into this term before. Outside of the workplace, ghosting is very common, I guess, in the dating world or like in the love relationship world of like if someone stops talking to you, someone stops communicating, and outside of that, surprisingly, it also happens in the workplace with your coworkers, your teammates. And so I have a roundtable question for everybody. If you could share your experience, have you guys ever ghosted someone at work or been ghosted? And like, what was that like? Yeah. So have you guys ever been ghosted or ghosted someone at work? Maria, since it's your first episode, maybe you can go first.
So thanks, Al. I was like thinking about this, and luckily, I haven't been ghosted by a team member before. And the closest one that I was ghosted on, if you can include that, technically the person hasn't really joined the team yet, hasn't really started work, but was briefed on a project, and he got to meet the team. But in that discussion, we realized that he might not be a good match. And once I felt this, I wanted to check in on this person to just have a check with him and to see how we want to move forward. But he never replied to my text or message until today. I was ghosted.
What did it feel like being ghosted?
I think it was confusing at first because he was actually referred by someone that I know, and we had a good chat. It felt good until that particular meeting, and then the ghosting happened. So I was a little bit concerned as well whether he was all right. But because he didn't reply at all, then I was also at loss what to do next. And I think at that point, the best thing was to just let it be and leave him be.
Yeah. I guess it's always weird when there's like you guys kind of vibe on the first meeting and then there's just like that total loss of communication afterwards. You don't really know what to do. So yeah, I guess it always leaves you in a weird state. How about you, Jaya? Have you ever been ghosted at work or been ghosted by someone at work?
For me, personally, I haven't ghosted anyone at work because, of course, I want to be professional and I don't want to burn bridges with my coworkers. But I've been on the receiving end of ghosting. So, in my personal experience, there was a time where I had a colleague and suddenly she just stopped working or she just ghosted us for a whole week. She stopped replying to our emails, messages, and we started to feel worried about it. about her. We were in a work from home setup. So the least thing we could do is to just message her and try to wait for her reply. And then later on, she showed up in a way that she was back in the team, replying to our messages. And later, we found out that she had been going through a mental breakdown. And she also shared that on top of that, because when you're working from home, you always get notifications, right, from the communication platform, whether it's WhatsApp, Slack, or Teams. And she developed an anxiety through that. Like, she would be easily triggered just by hearing the notification bell. And so, that experience has been an eye opening for me because I realized that ghosting at work isn't just about being careless or irresponsible. It could be a symptom of something that is deeper and can be someone's silent way of saying that they are not okay and that they just don't know how to ask for help. So that's for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm glad that you shared that because it's something that we could totally dissect later on in the episode. And personally, for me, I don't want to be the bad apple in the team, but I would say yes. Maybe it's a 50-50 situation, but hear me out. I would say yes. It was one of my first online gigs. And honestly, I almost forgot that this happened, but I was getting paid like $1 an hour. And I was aware that the pay was that much, but honestly, I was in it for the experience. And after almost a month of working there, I made a couple of videos, enough to film my portfolio. So basically, the gig was like video editing, and I had zero experience before. So I really wanted to get into it for the experience. So I think after almost a month, I made a couple of videos, enough to fill in my portfolio. I got the gist of the workflow, like answering emails, what the next step was, revisions, and everything. And I felt like I got what I needed. And I knew I wasn't going to last long there. So after about a month, I sent a message to my boss at that time and I let him know that I was leaving. And I messaged him saying that I did all of these videos, like these are all of the deliverables, and my work here is done. I didn't want to continue further, and he acknowledged it. We chatted for a little bit, and the thing was, he still wanted to kind of openly discuss my time and like pay. And honestly, I was just looking for another gig at that time. I felt like I had moved on from that little experience that I did. And so I just didn't respond after that, like the haggling part or like the open discussion part. I think I had completely moved on from it. And in my mind, I did the decency of letting them know that I was leaving. I didn't leave him in the like open air, and all of the open like projects I worked on, it was already closed before I left. So I think in that aspect, it felt like a good decision. But I guess the ghosting part is afterwards, where they were still open to discuss, whereas I wasn't anymore. And so I guess that's where the ghosting kind of came in the after later parts. But yeah, thanks for everybody's insights on that. And yeah, I don't want to be the bad apple in the team, but it seems like it. So that's an interesting topic that Jaya actually opened up, because since we have Maria in the episode, who's our workplace psychologist, it's always interesting to hear the science backed or psychology backed explanations or kind of like your insights on the topic. So we have a few questions for you. First is, do you think is ghosting a sign of burnout or poor leadership? So I think that's something that, like Jaya's personal experience with her coworker, that's something that is very eye-opening as well. And what do you think about that? Like, is ghosting a sign of burnout or poor leadership?
So thanks, Al and Jaya, for sharing as well. Very insightful, very different experiences from the both of you with regards to office ghosting. And for me, right, as I'm listening to your sharing, it seems like there are many different reasons for ghosting. And Jaya, you're absolutely right. Could be due to mental health reasons, or sometimes it's a lot of the communication that goes on, right? And you're not too sure where to end. So different people may ghost for various reasons, whether it is more psychological or maybe it's more cultural reasons. Some could be due to like conflict avoidance as well. Like for example, Al, when you're saying that, they were just haggling money and everything, there's also what I'm hearing is it's a fear of, or like just the discomfort in the confrontation or just continuing the conversation. And I believe you have done your best in your part to wrap up properly, but your former employer just wanted you to keep you on, and then you just didn't really know what to say, right? And when regards to like the poor leadership, it could be one of the reasons that leads to the breakdown in the psychological safety, making it hard for some people to talk about their challenges and all these things, and it can contribute to the office ghosting. But again, I think there's so many different factors that can lead to this.
Yeah. Thanks, Maria, for sharing. Yeah, I agree. I think it's not just about burnout or poor leadership. There are various of reason why someone would do ghosting. I think they feel like they don't have a choice, or it's more about their communication style as well. And I would also like to know, I'm curious, like for you, since you've been managing team over the past few years that you've been working, do you think that ghosting would affect team dynamics and trust? Like, how do you think it affects the workplace culture and the team dynamic?
Okay, that's a good question. And for me, I think that for ghosting to happen, it's likely that the team dynamic and the trust is already low in the first place. Right. And that's why the social bonding or the connectedness within the environment or with the colleagues is lower or it's weak. And therefore, it's easier to ghost. What I mean is that if you're close to someone or if you build a bond, you get to know each other well enough, it is likely that there's a higher chance of bonding to talk about the challenges and all these things. But if the team dynamic and the trust isn't there, then it's easier to leave and to ghost someone. And I also think that ghosting, you guys let me know whether this is what you think about this as well. But I think that ghosting is more common for online work, remote work setting rather than face to face. It's harder to just like go someone when if you see them every day, right? And for face to face workplace, I think there's more opportunities to already build a social bond, which can lead to less of the ghosting as compared to working online or working remotely. What do you guys think on that?
I guess I can go first. I think ghosting definitely is normalized in today's workplace, especially like with remote work, and I would say so, especially for younger people. This is just my like personal perspective, but I think when we're fresh out of school, we're fresh out of graduation, and on top of that, seeing all these TikTok videos or TikTok advice or Instagram advice from people within our age group, I think like with the influence of the internet and like being that young, some of us might have an unrealistic expectation of what our workload or what our salary or what our kind of career should look like. And so I've heard and seen some stories of like Gen Z being extra demanding despite having like no experience or no previous experience. So when they feel like it's not good enough for them, it's easy for them to ghost. I've also seen some videos online of like oh, after 5 p.m., if somebody from work messages you, don't talk to them or like don't reply because it's outside of your contracted hours. Like don't even bother. If the company is only paying you this for you to work up until 5 p.m., then just reply to messages up until 5 p.m. Like don't bother replying up until the next day. Like those are the advice that I've seen online. Like even when I started working, like that's all I ever saw with like advice. So I think there's a generational difference in like the opinions about work and like how we are set up. And so I think yeah, it is totally normalized within our I think considering the age group, considering where we are in life as well, like if we're just starting out, we don't really kind of have this prior experience as to what's appropriate in terms of like messaging or team dynamics and stuff like that. And so also especially with remote work where we don't meet face to face and there's not much regulations when working online. Like if we work in the office, you maybe a manager or like your team leader will be like walking around the office, seeing how people are, or like trying to build up the mood in the office or whatever. There's nothing like that when working online. And so it's so much easier to ignore or so much easier to just kind of if I'm not in the mood, then I'm not in the mood. Like it's a lot easier to do that nowadays. And so yeah, it's easy to ignore that since we are working online. That's not to say that it's the right thing to do. And I think over the years and with experience, I've realized that if you're working online, it's all the more reasons to be more communicative because you don't see them, they don't see you. It's nice to kind of, like ghosting comes from like a dating. It's like a dating term. And so if your partner doesn't talk to you the whole day, I don't think that's a good feeling with you. And so it's kind of the same thing in the workplace. Like if your teammate or your boss or like your coworker, your employee doesn't talk to you the whole day, it kind of leaves you like in like a weird place of I wonder how they are they in an accident, do they need help? You never really know unless you communicate. And so yeah, I think ghosting definitely is normalized in today's workplace and in remote work, but I don't think I agree with how it's supposed to be. There is definitely a boundary of how much time you're putting into work and stuff like that, but I think having that mutual kind of respect and that mutual understanding of how the team should be operating, trying to be as communicative as possible, especially working remotely. I think it definitely helps with like your team dynamics and your team culture. But yeah, that's my take on it. How about you, Jaya? What do you think?
Yeah, just to add
For
in a little
me,
bit, sorry,
yeah.
just so sorry, Jaya, but I'll just like brought up an interesting point, right? Because you're saying that there's so many rules, which are great, right? To ensure that there's a boundary between your work and your personal life, and that's another topic that we're not going to go into today. But it means that if you're working online, you only put on that identity of work cap when your laptop is on. Does it make sense? And then once you're done, you sort of close that laptop of yours, then you go on, and then you sort of resume your identity. However, for a workplace, right, there's this thing called like social identity or workplace identity, where if you're working in a building, you're together with someone, you sort of assume or you blend in, right, into that work identity, that you form something that you recognize as your own yourself. And it's harder to build if you are working online. And perhaps it's a difference as well, that ghosting becomes easier because it's just something that you just take off and then you can just walk away from it, because it's not something that is within the reality of work, that you don't need to connect with people. And perhaps that's a big difference, like the difference, right, that we see here. And so that's all I wanted to say. Sorry, Jaya, I sort of cut you off. Go ahead and
Yes.
share what you think on this.
Yeah, for me, I agree with Al that it's more like there's a difference with the generational, or like when it comes to age group, because I notice it more with the Gen Z, but I'm also not sure because it could be that we think that it is more frequent for the Gen Z only because it's being talked about, or people are actually sharing it on social media. And so we become aware, or we think that it's more common for Gen Z. But then in reality, it could have been happening all along with the past generations, right? But for me, if you compare remote setup with the on-site workplace, honestly, I don't think that ghosting has become that common or normalized in remote work. I just think that it's easier to seem like someone is ghosting when you are not in the same physical space. Because in an office setup, if someone goes quiet, you notice it right away. But remotely, silence doesn't always mean that someone is disengaged. They might just be focused or feel that there is no need to constantly check in. And in my experience, I have witnessed more ghosting, like working on site, to being work than me working from home. And so while it may appear more often in remote setups as what we might have witnessed, I think a lot of it is just misinterpretation rather than true ghosting. Because when you're working remotely, you just like update from time to time when there are projects, and there is no room to just chat there for some random chit chat. It kind of feels awkward to just text it there like in a the official communication channel. But then whereas in on-site setup, you actually have the opportunity to just keep chit-chatting and be active with everyone. So I think when it comes to remote setup, it could have just been misinterpreted rather than having a true ghosting. So that's my take on it.
Thanks. And both of you have mentioned about communication quite a lot, right? When we're talking about like office ghosting. So what would actually make it easier to communicate instead of ghosting then? And I'll just like, I want you to start with this because for your case, your first example of ghosting was you sort of like stopped the communication, you didn't reply. Would you have done it differently to make it easier, or what's your take on it? And then we'll go back to Jaya.
Yeah, I agree. So going back to like my previous example, I think I would, if that happened now, I would do it a lot more differently. And it goes to my point of this might come with experience and age, but sooner or later, I did soon realize that communication is key. So whether that's at work, your personal life, or like even this term of like ghosting, like in the dating world, I think communication is key. If you don't speak out with what's bothering you, or if you're not open to collaborating with your manager, your coworker, your teammate, if you're not open to discussing that on addressing your dilemma, so there won't be a solution. So if you're not open to addressing the problem firsthand, there's not going to be a solution for it. And so how I would do it differently now is going back to like that situation that I provided earlier. I think I would just kind of walk through the communication, that conversation of, if I'm not open to discussing any further, then I think I would voice that out of, oh, I'm actually looking for another opportunity at the moment, and I just don't think that this setup would work out. So I'm really thankful for the time we had together, and maybe in future projects it would be open to working. I think that's how I'd handle it, instead of just completely ghosting that person like from before. And yeah, as I mentioned, like it comes with age and experience. I think I had that conversation when I was 18. And I know like 18 is like the first age of when you're considered an adult, but I don't think I was completely mature at that time. Oh, that was like I don't know, that was such a childish behavior to do. But yeah, I think instead of ghosting, making it easier to communicate is if you're actually willing to communicate, and realizing that having that communication skills really builds like your personality, your professionalism as you go along your career. Yeah, I guess like having that willingness to figure things out in a collaborative manner, being open to communication, it's a lot easier to manage problems, dilemmas, or situations in general instead of just ghost. So that's my take on it.
Al, you mentioned a lot about like, aging. Well, not aging, but you were 18 at that time, right? So what is the factor then that made it so different now that you would have done it differently? What about your experiences or something that you feel like, hey, I could have done better at that time?
I think, yeah, I just that like experience as I've aged, just realizing that leaving someone on red, or leaving someone with like an open-ended thing, I don't think it's a good feeling to have. Like I guess realizing that from their perspective, if I keep messaging someone and they're not replying, I wouldn't want to leave them in a confused state. And so realizing that if I'm doing it to them, I don't think I would be comfortable if that was being done to me. So I guess having that, I don't know, I guess having that maturity to realize that as time goes on is going back, I guess, to like how we're taught in kindergarten or grade school, do unto others what you want others to do to you. If you're ignoring someone, I don't think it would be a good feeling for someone to be ignoring you when you want to discuss something. So, yeah, I guess at the end of it all, it's really just like realizing those things as you age along, or just realizing those things as you gather more experience along your career. And so that's where I kind of come from it.
Okay. All right. So with experience, it's also easier for you to tackle difficult conversations, saying bye, moving on, and all these. These would be something that it is easier to do with experience.
Yeah.
Jay, what about you?
Yeah, well, since Alice talking about aging, I just realized that I said earlier that I haven't experienced ghosting. Well, that's in the workplace. But now that she's talking about being 18 years old, I realized that when I was in college, I actually ghosted my classmates and some of my teachers because it got too overwhelming for me. I was always the class representative, and everyone was messaging me all the time for the project and like what's happening in school. And so I actually ghosted people that time. But then, as soon as I graduated and I entered the corporate world, I already had that professional mask on, and so I never ghosted anyone at all in the professional setting. But yeah, that's just a like a side story for my experience. But yeah, going back to the question, what would actually make it easier to communicate instead of ghosting in the workplace? I think for me, it would be having a culture that is more human. As what Maria said earlier, I realized that instead of thinking that ghosting would affect the trust in the workplace, it's actually because it could be that trust is not there to begin with. And so people or the employees don't feel really open to communicate whatever they're feeling. Like if I knew that I could say, hey, I'm not doing great mentally right now without being judged or penalized by my colleague or manager, then I would be more open. Also, just having a regular check in that feels like actual support, not just task updates, can really go a long way. As someone who have been under the leadership of various managers, I have witnessed different leadership style, and for me, I realized that as someone who is really empathetic and someone who sincerely cares about the employee, then I would actually feel that, and I would be more open to actually share my thoughts with my manager. And so it would be really easier to like have a collaborative workplace. And yeah, it would make you feel seen, and that makes it easier to speak up instead of just shutting down. So for me, it really comes with a human workplace culture that you are building on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Jaya. Like what you just mentioned just now. And I'm not buttering up Maria or like saying cute things to her or whatever, but this is genuinely what I feel. But I've been working with iGrow for 5 years now, and everything you mentioned, like having those one-on-one catch-ups and kind of having that personal conversations with the people in your team and feeling cared for in the team, that's what I feel with working at iGrow. Again, I don't want to make this episode like a or whatever, but it's genuinely what I feel with working with iGrow. And so you never really notice that, or you never really realize how precious that kind of team dynamic is once you kind of experience a whole different kind of team dynamic or setup at another workplace. And so that's something that I realized is having lasted this long, it goes beyond work and kind of feels like you are contributing to the team, and that your work is important, and that your work is appreciated. And so having that humane kind of dynamic within the team, receiving that from your teammates and kind of giving that as well. I think having that kind of like team dynamic and trust and bond with each other really helps with caring for your work instead of just like doing the bare minimum at work. So yeah, that's thanks for
Thanks,
that.
Al. My heart is full now hearing your feedback. And I think this is a great time to also, tell like, Jaya, you just joined the team, and just, I hope that this, we can continue to create this psychological safe environment for you. And if there's anything, feel free to let us know in the team as well. Yeah. All right. So let's come back to the topic here before we go into all nice and soft emotional part of our iGrow team. And so, what do you have next?
Yeah, so I guess just some context for like the listeners and everything is just kind of giving you some context to it. Jay has been working with like an on-site job beforehand, and now she's transitioning to iGrow. So if you notice her, I guess the background of some of her answers come from an on-site job or like having experience at on-site team dynamic. And so it's always very interesting to hear because with mine, like with the answers that I provided, it's all from like remote work. Right from when I was like 18 up until this point, it's all remote work. I haven't experienced working on site. Whereas Jaya has like that totally opposite. She's done hybrid, she's done online, she's done like on site. And so hearing her thoughts and opinions on these on this topic, yeah, it's interesting to know that background of, oh, okay, whichever like character you relate to in this episode is like, if you're like Jaya, you've experienced on-site, hybrid, remote. you can totally relate to what she's saying. Whereas for me, I've only really done remote. And so the people who have done remote maybe can relate more to my point of view. And so it's always so interesting hearing everybody's thoughts on this and the background that we've come from. And so everything that we shared is going to be challenged by this next segment. So we're doing an Am I the Asshole Reddit thread. And so if for the listeners who are not familiar with it, there's this very famous Reddit thread on Reddit. Basically, it's called Am I the Asshole? So people will be sending their situations and describing everything in detail. And so at the end of the situation, we get to decide as listeners, as readers, if this person is the asshole or not. And so for this episode, we're dissecting a Reddit thread on office ghosting. So um I'm gonna be reading the whole post. And so at the end of it all, we'll be deciding each of us will be deciding if this person is the asshole or not. So I'm gonna be reading the whole post and then everybody can share their opinion afterwards. So here we go. Am I the asshole for ghosting my job? I just transferred to a new location after working at another store for 14 months. And it was good at first. But then I started having a lot of stress at my new store. They constantly scheduled me during my classes for college and had me working nearly 40 hours a week while I'm a full time student. I had made it clear that school was my priority, as it should be, but it didn't matter to them in the slightest. They started treating me poorly after my first week there and reprimanding me for almost everything they felt I may have done wrong. They won't even try to make it constructive criticism, which would have been fine with me. I love to work hard and learn how to do things better, but not if you make me feel stupid. It had gotten so bad that the last time I showed up to my shift, I had a breakdown at the end of the day and say how it was getting all too much for me, how I felt undervalued, belittled, used, and burnt out. I haven't gone back since. Now, I have blocked my work's number and all repeat callers whose number I don't have saved. Should I have told them I quit because I couldn't handle it anymore? Or is it okay to just disappear into the night? By the way, this is not a professional business job. I work at a grocery store. So that's the entire post. And I'm curious to know. I think me and Jaya can go first, and then Maria's professional answer can go last. So I guess I can go first. I feel like just reading it off the bat, I feel like there's more to this story, but my initial thoughts are no, she doesn't seem like the asshole since she mentioned that she seemed fine working at the original store before relocating to the bad one. And so I guess in terms of work priorities or her habits at work, she seemed to be doing fine at the original one. It's just that she seemed to shut down with this new store. And so having that like history of seeming like you're okay to work at this store, maybe the new store was like an environment that she just didn't fit in. And so another point is she says that she's a hard worker, like she claims it in the post, and she's already voiced out her priorities beforehand with like her new team, and it just seemed like she was being ignored. So maybe like in this context, maybe the management is the one who's not willing to collaborate. And she did mention like when she made a mistake or something, she would feel stupid or belittled afterwards. Just having that sour feeling of me making a mistake, but then also feeling very belittled afterwards instead of like correcting her or giving constructive criticism. And so I think in this case, she may have realized that she just doesn't fit in with like the team or the work culture there. And maybe their values don't align with her. Especially with that part of feeling stupid after being reprimanded, is there might have been better ways to tackle the situation. If somebody made a mistake, everybody makes mistakes, whether it's like the employee or the manager. I think just kind of figuring it out afterwards and giving constructive criticism afterwards would be very helpful instead of calling up somebody stupid and then like having them shut down at work. So having that, yeah, she did mention that in the post. So I don't think she's the asshole here. She seems it just seems like she doesn't fit in with the work culture, with the team, and like the values that they have in that branch. The thing I don't necessarily agree with is ghosting in the end, which I might sound like a hypocrite for, but it might be like a pride or ego thing to talk to people that you don't like or you just don't want to see them. But, since it is the workplace, I think just having the decency to let them know that you're leaving is important, especially since this is a grocery store, which you mentioned. The shifts that she initially has, it might not be covered with the other employees at that time. And so maybe just kind of letting them know that you're leaving and then having them figure out what to do afterwards would be a better transition for them. I think also just yeah, I guess that's another takeaway. But basically, yeah, for me, I don't think she's the asshole in this situation. How about you, Jaya?
Well, for me, honestly, I totally get where OP is coming from. Being a full time student and working a stressful job at the same time is really overwhelming. I've been through that in college. I was a working student for 2 years, so I really get when that it's actually overwhelming, especially when your employer is not supportive at all. And in her case, she actually communicated her needs, her schedule, and what's her setup. And so I don't think she is the asshole in this context, because in this case, when your boundaries keep getting ignored by management, it can start to feel like you are trapped and you have no choice. So it's in this context, it's not just about having bad scheduling, but it's also like she's being disrespected with how they are treating her. Now, I'm not saying that ghosting is the right move. Of course, it is not. But and she could have definitely sent a proper resignation. But when you are completely burned out and feel like no one is hearing you, then ghosting sometimes feel like the only way to take back some control. And it's like it's the last thing that you could do. And some people would just resort to it. And so, even if it's not the best way to handle things, I don't think she is the bad guy in this situation. And to me, it's more like a reaction to the kind of work culture that she is stuck in, because she already tried to communicate everything, but nothing is working. And most people would ghost at work because not just because they're being lazy or irresponsible. It usually happens when they feel like communicating won't change anything. And communication is a two-way thing, right? You would have to communicate your needs, and at the same time, they would have to listen to your needs, and it's just vice versa. And so if the other party is not doing the same thing, then it's just bound to fail, and there would be communication gap, the expectations aren't met, and so of course it will create some, yeah, like the bridge is gonna fall down between the employer and the employee. And so people are not feel seen and supported by the management, and this is why ghosting would happen. So yeah, just to wrap up my answer, I don't think she is the asshole, and I get where she is coming from. Of course, ghosting is not a thing that we will be promoting, but it's totally understandable why she did that. That's my take on it.
Thanks, Gia. Honestly, I don't know whether if there's anything else I can add, because I agree as well that the OP is not the asshole in this case. And just to add on, I really love your point, Jaya, about exercising control and taking care of yourself. Because if you're in that environment and you have no control, despite sharing and then communicating and trying to do all that already, at the end, the OP just had to take care of herself, right? And I just want to add as well that while the best thing to do, right, is to inform, to formalize and to end or to terminate or anything, right, like the work that you're doing. In this case, the OP has communicated as much as possible. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to be seen as the problem. Think about it, right? And she has the comparison with the other store where she felt good. She was happy there. And while the store is a lot of the negativity, and it probably made her feel less off, right? Lesser of herself. And nobody wants to be the problem. And by ghosting, it just means that she's just quitting in a way and not wanting to be in that situation anymore. But I also think that it's also saving herself from getting and receiving more negative feedback or and comments from the people there. And that's why I agree with the both of you that uh, she's not the asshole.
Yeah. It's always so interesting to hear everybody's thoughts on it. And for the first time in like this is the third episode. I think for the first and second, the with the previous host, everybody had different opinions. This is the first episode where everybody's like, no, she's not the asshole.
I think we're just looking into like, you know, like what is she experiencing as well, right? That yeah, we sort of understand why she would write this, and then that it is best to end properly, but in this case, well, we're nice and we think that she's not.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks everybody for your opinions on that. But I gathered a lot of thoughts and kind of notes from this episode, like with Jaya and Maria. And I hope everybody listening to this, you also kind of have some new insights with ghosting and just like the related topics on it. So yeah, with like as we're wrapping up the episode, I want everybody to share their actionable takeaway or summarize some like practical tips that you would want to give practical advice to somebody about office ghosting. Um yeah, I guess your own opinions on it and everything. I guess I could go first and then we can have Jaya and then Maria's psychology backed opinion or psychology backed like takeaway for this episode. For me is ghosting, I think, is very understandable, especially if you consider everything in the situation. It's an understandable thing to do, but I won't say that it's necessarily the right thing to do. So, my actionable takeaway or like a practical tip is um, I guess the most basic one is let them know that you're leaving instead of ghosting your previous employer or like a coworker or like even an employee. Let them know the situation or where you're coming from. I guess from my point of view is we all enter jobs for the experience, career building your career. So I guess getting into it, we won't necessarily know what might be the reason that we ghost or we leave. And so we won't necessarily know what's wrong with like the company or the team or what problems you might face until you're actually in it. And so it kind of feels like a gamble of something in the job post might look intriguing and but when you actually go there you might not it might not be all that, and also vice versa. Something like a job post might not be that intriguing, but when you get there, the team dynamic is really nice and like the workplace culture and everything. So what I'm getting at is you won't necessarily know if you would last long in this job or not unless you're actually employed there. And so regardless of the problems or like the people or the dilemmas that you face in the company or at work, I think at the end of it all, trying to stay as professional as possible is important. You don't want to burn bridges or leave a bad taste with your previous employers or coworkers or teammates, regardless of what your experience is like. And so I guess having the decency of letting them know you're leaving instead of ghosting, that might be like the minimum or like minimal thing to do. Yeah, I guess going back, it is understandable as to the feeling of wanting to ghost, but it might not necessarily be the right thing to do in terms of personal and professional as well. So that's my actionable takeaway. Yeah, how about you, Jaya?
Right. Thanks for sharing, I. For me, for my takeaway, well, it's gonna come from my personal experience being in HR. I've conducted exit interviews and talked with my colleagues who actually ghosted. So I've had some firsthand opinions and experiences coming from them. And so I would just like to say that if you ever ghosted at work, I just want to say that you're not alone. Reaching that point usually means you are dealing with something really overwhelming. And honestly, I don't think people ghost because they don't care. Like I kept saying that many times already because in most cases, it actually comes from something serious like burnout, mental health struggles, or feeling completely ignored and unsupported. And for those people who are on the receiving end, it's actually hard to empathize because you don't really understand how they are feeling. So you would be just like judging them for like being weak, not being able to communicate, or just having that bad attitude. But sometimes it's even more extreme. There are cases where people ghost because of harassment, or when they feel unsafe or threatened at work. And those are the issues that they don't normally talk about, and you won't even know at all, because of course those are the issues that they are never gonna talk about with their colleagues. And when the environment feels that toxic, disappearing might feel like the only way to protect yourself. And so for me, I really understand where these people are coming from. And that said, if you are in a position where you can, it's always better to send a message or let someone know you are stepping away. Even something like short message with their colleague or a boss would leave you on a better note and keeps future opportunities open. Because again, we don't want to burn bridges, but of course, there are extreme scenarios where it could actually lead to that. And also, if you've been on the receiving end of ghosting, it helps to lead with empathy. Most people who ghost aren't being careless or lazy. They just probably didn't feel like they had the space or support to speak up in the first place. And at the end of the day, communication and compassion really go together. If we want less ghosting, we need to create workspaces where people feel heard, respected, and safe. And it's so easy to say that, right? We keep saying that, oh, we need to have a safe workplace, like people would be heard and respected. But then to actually establish that with different people, it's actually really hard. People in organization are really complicated. And so leaders should do regular temp checks, create space for honest one-on-one conversations, and pay attention to warning signs like disengagement or silence, because we would actually notice that, but no one is making an action. No one would actually check in on that person, but would just rather judge that person. And it's not just about policies, it's about genuinely checking and listening so issues can be addressed before someone feels the need to disappear. And so I would like to end with a note that let's aim to build the kind of workplaces people actually want to stay in, not ones that they feel the need to run from it or just disappear. So that's the takeaway I would want to share with everyone.
Awesome. Both Jaya and Al for the practical applications here. And I guess I'm going to just summarize the summary of what you have given, because I have a lot of the same points as you, right? And I think from the very beginning, when I said that perhaps the team dynamic is already shaky, and that resulted in the ghosting. So for me, I'm going to leave you and everyone who's our listeners here with an acronym, iGROW style, and the acronym is STAY. Right. So not ghost, but stay and have a conversation first. And this is how we can keep people engaged and not to ghost. And the first one is S, which is show you care. Building a real relationship, whether you're working online, remotely, or even face-to-face, requires us to continue to build that relationship and bonding with everyone. And this includes celebrating milestones, anything, the success that you have, or even just checking in with people all around you. And this can create the feeling, the genuine concern and care for everyone. So that is S, show you care. T stands for talk about expectations. And as many of you, both of you have mentioned about, sometimes it's the communications, it's sometimes unclear. And by providing feedback, and of course, it needs to be something that is constructive, something that people can follow through with, and to have an idea what is expected, right? Like what is a success? What is expected of each and everyone within the team is really helpful. And not only that, it can help to build confidence when you are successful. And so that is T, talk about expectations. A is ask. Don't assume. We assume too much. We think about what we think, that we know what other people are thinking, and 100%, well, not 100%, but perhaps like 80% of the time, it can be very different from what we assume. So by creating a safe space within the team, talk within the team about the workload, your well-being, and sometimes as conflicts or dissatisfaction can be very helpful because nobody, as I mentioned before, nobody wants to be the problem. Nobody wants to feel unheard. Nobody wants to feel that they're not listened to because this could lead to ghosting. And if we're able to provide that platform, the safety, and for people to ask and not assume, that could be helpful. And finally, why is yield recognition. Celebrate the effort, not just the results, but acknowledge some of the small wins as well, right? And like for today, Al, you mentioned about working in iGROW and how it has been really nice for you. That is a bit of a win for me as well, that because we really want to create a positive, a good culture here. And just hearing that, and I felt like recognized for the work that I do and here. And that's like a little bit of that appreciation. And this is something that we can do, right? It doesn't have to be from top down, or it could be from anyone in the team to provide that recognition to one another. And this makes people feel that they're not ignored, that they are recognized, that they're one person in the team. And all of this, I hope that all of this can reduce the chance of ghosting, and for people to feel that they can speak up properly, they can feel safe to grow and also continue to develop within the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Jaya. Today has been a really fun and real conversation. I appreciate everybody's insights on it. And honestly, this episode today really gave me something to think about. And I hope that also feels the same with our listeners. I hope you found our takeaways, or even like the conversations we had earlier, insightful, relatable. If it's relatable, comment down below your own your own situations or experiences. But yeah, so thanks everybody for the time that you gave today, to Maria, Jaya, and even to our listeners. Like I mentioned, I hope today was insightful for you, relatable, and I hope you took something away from today's episode. But that's it for today's coffee break. And thanks for hanging out with us in the break room. Don't forget to share this with your favorite work buddy. And if you got thoughts, rants, or feels, slide into our DMs, leave a comment below, or message us. We're at iGROWOnline on most platforms. And remember, your well-being matters even between meetings. So catch you next time, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you soon.